Hey guys, on this week's episode of Founder Story, you'll hear how Dave Clark with OM Digital took the idea of a photo booth and a $13,000 investment from his siblings and turned it into an international experiential marketing company whose customers include Nike, Vanity Fair, and Louis Vuitton. Music on this episode from Andrew Applepie and Joachim Karud. Links to their music are included in the episode description. Special thanks to my wife, Shandy, for putting up with me recording and editing these episodes every week. She cares for our boys while I'm doing this side project at night and on the weekends. I couldn't do it without her support. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm great. Hey, thanks so much for joining the podcast. I really appreciate it. How's everything going in California?
Great. Sunny California. The weather's great. Life is good. Can't complain.
Well, I appreciate you joining the podcast. So today we're going to talk about your journey with OM Digital, but I want to start out with just kind of understanding, what is OM Digital? What is your company? What do you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we actually started with a different name. We started under the name of Anamana Media. And Anamana Media at the time was something that we thought was a cool, clever name. And we did get a lot of people who understood kind of the play on the word onomatopoeia. And they thought it was a clever, great name. But it really started to get pretty old to explain how to spell our email over phone calls. He said, how many O's, how many N's? So over time we decided,
backspace.
Yeah, exactly. Like ONOMONO, like not a lot of people can do that very quickly. So over time we felt it was good to rebrand to OM Digital. And that's kind of where the OM came from, is kind of a shortened version of Anamana Media, because we don't want to forget our roots. But that's where the name Anamana Media started, and then eventually progressed to OM Digital.
Awesome.
But as short, when we first started Anamana Media, I started that when I was in college, and the intention was to be a photo booth rental company. And to those who might not be familiar with that, the concept is pretty simple. You build a photo booth, whether that's digital or prints, like you might know of, like old-timey photo booths that you take 4 pictures and it prints out a print. But we built a digital and physical photo booth with the intention of hiring it and renting it out at events, whether that be birthday parties or weddings or social gatherings, whatever that was. The idea was the clients would hire us. We would rent them out with unlimited amount of photos, and we would customize the photo booth experience to their event. Mm-hmm. So instead of it being like, just photos, they could customize it with their own logos or branding or messaging that they wanted, and we could adjust all sorts of things for them. And those would be unlimited. So guests wouldn't have to put money in the machine to take a picture. Anybody that was at that party could take an unlimited amount of photos. And that was the initial start of Anamana Media.
So what was going on in your life? What year was it? When did you start this company? Kind of set the stage. What was going on when you decided to start this company? Where were you working? What were you doing?
Yeah, so back in 2009, I was in Provo, Utah, doing some school. And my girlfriend that at the time became my wife that year, and she was just about wrapping up with school. And I was in college, and a friend of mine introduced me to this concept of photo booths and renting them out at parties in Utah. And I thought it was an odd concept at first before I had seen it at parties, because when you think of photo booths, you think of the mall and whatever, and it just didn't make sense to me. But he brought me along, and I did my first event with him, and I saw how much people loved it, and it actually was really, really cool. And it kind of just became a little bit of a passion. I didn't have a photography background. I didn't have a design background, or anything like that. But I definitely had a propensity to, to influence people and make people happy. And I felt like I was a personal person. So it was a good fit because I got to be at these events and make people happy. So I started working with the company that he was with back in those days. And then after my wife had graduated from nursing school, I had the intentions of being in the FBI or being a super spy agent. That was kind of that was kind of what I wanted to do long term.
Right.
And my in-laws lived in the Washington D.C. area, and since she wasn't with school and I was still so far from graduating, I was like, you know what, we're not too far into this. Let's move out to D.C. and let's go finish school there. And
what were you studying at the time?
I was doing political science at first, but eventually I realized, actually pretty quickly, that that's not what I wanted to do.
Right.
And kind of by default went to business, just simply because I knew I liked sales and I liked marketing and I liked those type of things. And so I decided to switch while I was in DC. But when we first got there, I just got an internship, and I wasn't quite sure if that photo booth company was going to be something that could follow me along into Washington, D.C., because the company that I was working with had pretty limited resources and much of a desire to expand that much. So, I wasn't quite sure if that would go any further. For a little bit, though, I engaged the owner of that company and I said, "Hey, can I do this out here in D.C.?" And he said, "I guess we could try it out." Right. And so he sent me a booth in DC, and I basically ran the thing by myself. And very quickly I realized, well, this company isn't managed very well, but I think that I'm pretty good at this, and I could probably make money doing this while in college without having to have a boss and a typical schedule. Because a lot of these things are, weekend gigs and they're nights, and that works very well with a college student with kind of a demanding school schedule. So I was like, this could be a really cool thing.
Yeah. So you're out in DC and you are still affiliated or associated with the company that you started with in Provo. And so you started up on your own out there. What was it like in the beginning? Was it pretty successful from the get-go, or what was that like?
Yeah, the hard part about it with the other company was that I didn't really have a lot of say into what I could do for sales. I kind of just waited for their inquiries to come in. They did a little bit of SEO and ads in that area to kind of see how it was going. And back in those days, in the end of 2009, it was not like a common thing. You'll see these at almost every party now.
Right.
But back in those days, it was not like a common occurrence. So, it wasn't very frequent that it was happening. And that's kind of what drove me to think this can be so much better if I just kind of had the reins, and I was able to kind of control my own destiny with this.
Right. So how did that happen then? So you're out in DC, you're feeling like, hey, I'm not getting enough leads. So in the beginning, you weren't doing sales, you were just like kind of fulfilling or
I was working events. I was working the events that they'd give me, and feeding the leads that I would get at events to them, and then hopefully it would turn into stuff. And at that time, that's what it was. But eventually, one of the other guys that was working within that company, he also knew that company just wasn't going anywhere. It really wasn't. He approached me initially, and his name is Stephen Beatty. He approached me initially one day and was like, "Dude, we should start this. I mean, we should start our own thing. And you could totally be the sales guy, and I'll be the tech guy, and let's do this." Because he had a web design background and kind of a technology. He was kind of a jack of all trades type guy with that. And that wasn't my strength for sure. So, there was the temptation there to, hey, this would be good. And, I made sure I checked and make sure that I wasn't breaching any sort of contract, and we were all good there. But, of course I didn't have any money. I'd been working an unpaid internship. I was in one of the most expensive places to live in America. And my wife had just started out as an RN, working full time as well. But we didn't really have any money to put down to start anything.
Dave, I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. That sounds like a perfect setup to start a business in a new city. Wife is doing school. You're young and don't have a lot of money. That sounds like the perfect time to get started.
Yeah, it sounds bonkers. And all the while I'm trying to finish school as well myself.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate because I had some siblings that trusted me and believed in me. Mm-hmm. And so I had two siblings that gave me basically just like, you valued it whatever you want. This is your terms. We just believe in you, and we're going to give you some money. So between my two siblings, I got $13,000 to start up Anamana Media at the time.
Wow. Which did that go to like building your first booth, or what was that? What was the idea?
Everything that we needed to do to start a company, make the LLC, get the proper business license in the state of Virginia is where we first operated. It's just outside of DC. Create the first photo booth that we made, anything that it cost to make our own booth. And to those who don't know, we didn't just buy one off of eBay or a used one. We went to a carpenter, gave him a design, gave him all the physical hardware components that we wanted to use, everything from the camera to the flash, the screen to the computer, everything. And we said, we want you to build a booth that looks like this and can fit all of this equipment in it. And we want it to look beautiful. And so we were able to do all of that and have a little tiny budget for, to put a little bit of money into Google Ads and whatever in the beginning stages. And luckily my partner was a web designer. So he made our website, and that didn't cost us anything. We got our logo made and our branding on all that done, which was great. So we were able to get that all on the road with that $13,000 initially.
Wow. So in the beginning, it's you and your friend. You got $13,000. You build out the booth. Where you're in DC at the time, you mentioned that photo booths weren't like, people knew what they were, but you weren't used to seeing them at events like we are today. Was it difficult in the beginning selling and explaining to people what it was and why they needed it? Or how did you go about like marketing and educating people on kind of your new use case or spin on the photo booth?
Yeah, definitely. Because it wasn't exactly like a hot word for key searches and for searches on Google. Right. Yeah, it wasn't like people were Googling photo booth rentals all over the place. It was getting more and more common, but I hustled like crazy at wedding shows, at all sorts of different conferences. I would just donate my weekends to go to different venues that would have open houses where they would brides and grooms would come through to check out the space, check out other vendors, meet potential photographers. And I just remember doing that for weekends and weekends at a time, showing them and just giving people, hey, here's the experience. This is what we do. And through that, I would meet brides and I would meet guests, and people would be like, whoa, this is really, really cool. And people that weren't even planning to do that started to see this is a really cool addition to, our wedding or to our party. And then on top of that, we would build relationships with the venues that were there so that when we weren't there, they would, recommend us to other people as well. So that was really, there was a lot of hustle in the beginning for sure.
Yeah.
And it took a lot, and you have to be very, very patient, because at the time, now I think back at it, I was crazy because this was a college job at the time. I didn't know how long this would last. And I didn't know, I didn't really have the foresight that I do now, to realize what kind of potential there was. So I was donating a lot of my time, and I think back of it and I'm like, what motivated me to do that? Like, we weren't making any money. I didn't pay myself for almost a year, not a single dime.
Yeah.
I lived off of my wife's income. But, I think back at it and, subconsciously, as an entrepreneur, you have to have this killer instinct. And I knew it was a good service because I'd seen it before. I'd seen the excitement, and every show you just get one new customer, but you just knew that it was going to grow. I just knew it was going to grow eventually. So I just kept persistent with it. And eventually I started to, get our first kind of gigs out of it. And there was a little bit of working capital to kind of explore some new technology with.
Yeah. So in those beginning days, was it, you mentioned that you went to like a lot of bridal shows and stuff like that. Was it mostly weddings where you were getting business like in the beginning?
In the very, very beginning, yes. But I had this kind of crazy idea I, because I'd been to a lot of weddings already between the first company that I'd been with and then this company, and weddings were starting to really grow on my nerves, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. There's
Uh,
only so many you can go to. Right.
exactly. It's a stressful thing too. Like weddings
Yeah.
are pretty stressful. But I remember driving down Georgetown. It's a nice neighborhood in DC, and seeing a poster for like um, a photo festival, like a photography festival.
Hmm.
And I remember like, I'm going to reach out to them. We should see if we can get involved with that somehow. And I went to the website and I clicked on the volunteer thing and I said, "Hey, we do this photo booth, this really awesome photo booth." And truly, when I say awesome photo booth, like people would say it was the most flattering photos they had ever seen,
Wow.
like in a photo booth. Like they loved it. And Steven and I really took pride in that when we made it.
Hmm.
We used high quality camera. We worked very hard on making the flash be super flattering. We that meant a lot to us when people would say that. So we felt like we were at the caliber where we could be at a photography festival,
Yeah.
and we donated our services there. And so you're in front of a lot of photography folks and a lot of people that are kind of involved in the arts in Washington D.C. And they started inviting us to kind of the nicer parties as well, and asked, "Would you guys like to come to this one?" And eventually, we found ourselves at the Corcoran Art Gallery, which is a super nice museum and art gallery in DC, and it also is an art school out there in DC. And we're doing this like opening party where there's this posh music and this who's who of DC in
Right.
front of us.
And you're there with
And
your photo booth that you built with the $13,000 that you got from your siblings.
absolutely, we're there
Wow.
in one of the fanciest buildings in DC with this photo booth that we literally had crafted ourselves.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and
Wow.
we're in front of like who's who's of DC. And the coolest part about it is
That's
they have,
amazing.
the company that, if you've ever seen those 3D mappings on the NBA courts, like those amazing pregame shows.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's done by a company. I'm doing a plug for them, I guess, by named Quince Imaging, and
Hmm.
they're like these legit AV guys. Like they
Yeah,
do all of those 3D projection mapping.
yeah.
Well, it turns out they were like partners with this same festival, and they had like projection screens lined up all around this atrium in
Uh-huh.
this building, and they gave us access to one of the screens, and they said, "Hey, if you want to hook up into your feed, if you guys can figure it out, by all means, let's do it."
Oh, cool.
And
And you just
so
got to be
we
friends with them at this event.
Yeah, absolutely. And the
Wow.
greatest part about it is, the flattering photos are being blasted on top of the photo booth. Literally, they're hanging above the photo booth because they're being hung from this giant projection screen from this atrium.
Uh-huh.
And so people all over the party are able to see this huge projection of these beautiful photos being made from this photo booth. And people went
Wow.
nuts. Like the whole party gravitated over to our booth. And I look around and I'm like, these are like people that I would have never dreamed of being able to like interact with at this point.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and they're lining up. There's, big time photographers and who's who of DC waiting in line for 30 minutes to get in our booth.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
yeah, and I'm sitting there just, this is unreal. Now at the time we hadn't been paid to be there, but but I will say it
But
was
it's
the
worth it.
smartest marketing decision that we had ever made, because the amount of relationships that we were able to build from that one experience, I can't even count. Like unbelievable exposure and experience. So that was definitely an early turning point to where we realized, hey, maybe we aren't just like a wedding photo booth company. Maybe this has more to it than that.
Yeah, this could be bigger than that. That's amazing. And all of that came from you realizing that, hey, there's an opportunity to do the photo booth thing, whatever it might be in DC, and then just going out and meeting people and offering to do events for free in the beginning to get your name out there. And then maybe that one thing with those AV guys that were able to get your beautiful photos up where everybody could see them sounds like that was a huge turning point for you guys.
Yeah, it was. In fact, that same weekend we had made another deal at with another big event. So that was kind of like my big marketing push, was to like donate these or sponsor events. And in a very similar situation in the National Building Museum, this is all within a week period. And the National Building Museum is also an amazing. If you're ever in DC, go check it out. It's awesome. It's a great building to go see. But it's this huge building. You can fit thousands of people in. And this was an event where literally it featured the best of Washington. So like best food, best whatever it is, but it was mostly featured around food. And we had donated our booth there as kind of like a feature of entertainment and engagement for the company that was sponsoring this event. And a very similar situation happened with an AV company where they had some projection there, and we told them, hey, just a week ago, we were able to pull off this live projection feed from the booth. And they're like, what? Really? You can do that? And we're like, yeah, we just figured it out. And they're like, sure. And then they got this AV company to set us up there with the same situation. So you've got this giant building with literally thousands of people able to see the feed from our booth in front of the whole thing. And that event was an hour wait to get in the booth, literally an hour. And I remember sitting there. I still look back at those pictures, and you can see me. I have a picture where I'm looking up at the projection screen, talking to two girls, like looking at their pictures, and there's an hour wait of a line behind us.
Wow.
It was great.
What's going through your head when that's happening? Because in the course of a week, all of a sudden things are different.
Yeah, and this was within. I want to say this was within 6 months of us starting.
Wow.
And so I was like, this is unreal. Now, at that point, it hadn't meant any revenue, but I could see that's when I was like, I need to not give up on this. I need to stick with this. I need to be persistent. And luckily, I have this wife who just is a trooper. She's so trusting, and she was literally the breadwinner for a long time, and she still practically is, but in many ways. But we just stayed persistent with, because I saw how it engaged people and how it was really it really meant more than just getting a printout of a photo. It was a way that brands could socially engage their customers or the consumers, and people could spontaneously evolve their own brand. And that's when we started to realize, hey, we're not a photo booth company. We're an experiential marketing company. And that's really what we do. Like we're an engagement marketing company. We're about event marketing and ground marketing, and we do those type of things. But it's definitely grown even more since those early days.
Wow, that's incredible. So I want to understand. So you walk away from these couple of events where all of a sudden things are different. Do you have a bunch of relationships from there that turn into sales? Are you still kind of just doing this on the weekend for weddings are still a big part of the business? Like, tell me how you transition from that event where you're like, okay, we're not just a photo booth company for weddings. It can be so much more than that. Where did you go after that? What were the next steps from there?
Yeah, so from those events, we definitely got a lot of relationships. In fact, I remember that night at that one at the National Building Museum, getting a card from someone who worked at the Smithsonian, at one of the Smithsonians. And she gave me a card and she said, we have an event in 3 weeks. I would love this at our event. And I was just like on cloud nine. I was like, the Smithsonian is going to hire me? Like, I'm going to get a check from the Smithsonian? Like, are you kidding me?
I've made it. That's amazing.
Yeah, I don't need anything more in life. And now I kind of like that. But it was great. It was such a great moment.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I walked away from that single event with, probably 50 cards of people just being like, hey, talk to us. And from both events, it was kind of a slow burn too, because not everybody, has their event every week. It's not like a consumer product that every consumer has a need for this every day. It's not as a frequent type of a need, but I definitely walked away with a lot of experiences and cards, especially in relationships with people that equaled business, and a lot of them still are customers to this day, 7 years later.
That's incredible. So I want to just touch on this and then kind of continue through the journey. But I'm really curious because it sounds like a lot of your success through marketing is kind of been networking more so than just like online marketing. You just got out and met people and showed them, what the experience was by delivering it. Has that been an important part? Is that primarily how you've marketed the company, or has the like digital and online marketing still been a big part of what you guys do?
Yeah, well, in the beginning stages, that definitely played a huge part, especially in the realm where it wasn't really something that was hot and there wasn't a lot of people doing what we were doing. There was a few here and there, but certainly not in DC. We were definitely, a big fish in a small pond there, in those days, at least in that realm. So a lot of our marketing did come from just networking and having relationships and going out and meeting people and those type of things. And a lot of it came from referral business. If you're connected with a really great, trusted source. So, we got a really great relationship with a publishing company out there, and an online publishing company. And they basically write articles about what's going on cool in DC, this or that, food, music, art, whatever it is, and then they throw their own events. And everyone knows this company and they follow that company. And we started to become partners with them, and their trust in us equaled so much business, because all these brands that want to be part of their events, because they literally target the exact demographic that they're going after, they're seeing that we're these partners and like, whoa, who are these guys? Well, we can use them at other things. So it's a domino effect when you're able to build the right type of network. And we were able to find a sweet spot on when and where we would have effective, donation or sponsored events. Not every sponsored event worked out great or was a great relationship. There was a lot of time that you're like head scratching after, man, we shouldn't have done that. Right. And those were learning lessons. But now it still plays a role in what we do, especially as we try to break through with new products and we want to show our clients new products. A lot of what we do is so visual that it's hard to just kind of do over an email or over a cold call. Yeah. You have to show people, and once people get in front of what we do, they're just hooked instantly. Yeah. So that played a big part in the beginning. I would say now, though, because there is a lot of players in the game and it's a pretty fierce competition out there, we've definitely taken a much bigger role in social media marketing for ourselves and digital marketing strategy. We definitely play, the Instagram marketing game, and we're starting to get a lot more resources put into our digital marketing strategies because there's a lot in the experiential marketing world, especially with what we're doing with content creation and social media sharing platforms. So it definitely plays a role with both of those these days. But I definitely train our sales team to be focused on building a network, and not be afraid of showing people our product and giving people an experience with our product, because once they've experienced our process and our product, they just get hooked.
So as you get into 2011, you're getting more corporate customers. You've built out this booth that helps you to facilitate like the social sharing. At this point, is it still you and was your friend's name Steve?
Yeah, Steve. It was me and Steve at that point. And eventually, as we started to do more and more events in New York, we realized I can't do all this stuff in DC and New York as much as we are at the same time. And actually, at an event, we met what is now one of our partners. His name is Ben Gustafsson. We met him. He was actually shooting the event as a photographer. He's a professional photographer, and we kind of recruited him. We wined and dined him and said, "Hey, do you think about kind of running the show for us out in New York?" And he was all about that. It ended up being one of the best decisions that we made, was kind of make the plunge into, hey, let's try to get into New York. It's a big market. There's a lot of business to be had. If we're going to get into marketing, DC is not, the biggest. DC's plenty of events, but it's not a huge marketing company or marketing city. You're not going to have a ton of agencies and all that stuff. But in New York, that was the gold mine.
Yeah.
So
That's where everything is happening. So you bring him on, and he gets on board and launches kind of your New York headquarters.
Yeah, he started to kind of do the same stuff I was doing in DC in the early days, but in New York, kind of building up our own clientele. And then we had a couple agencies that we'd been working with a couple on projects throughout, where he could then foster it, and it'd be easier for us to service them and service their events without a ton of travel, because we'd already made the investment in sending some equipment up in New York. So at this time we built around 4 booths. So we had 3 in DC, and 1 in New York, and the third one in DC would kind of be our traveling booth. We'd ship it I remember in the early days we'd shipped one all the way to San Francisco for an event once, and we'd all over the place, and we were kind of like, is this like what's happening? Like, people are going to send us all over the country. But logistics kind of played a big role in those early days, that we were able to kind of figure out how to get the booth to different places, and expanded our ability to meet others, which was a really pivotal part in our growth, because I remember doing the next big turning point in the expansion of the company was we were doing an event in Chicago, and we got connected with someone at an event that got us in front of Armani Exchange.
Oh, wow.
And they really liked our booth. And I remember Ben, we had set up an appointment to do a demo in front of all the upper management of Armani Exchange. And Ben is doing this demo in front of the CEO of Armani Exchange and all the upper people. And I remember just feeling like, is this for real? Like, this is crazy. And
Wow.
they ended up hiring us over that holiday season. But the scale and scope of what they wanted us to do at the time seemed impossible, because they wanted us to be doing 13 simultaneous cities throughout the country, and even one in Canada, over 2 weekends into December. And this was December 2012. And at the time
when did they try to sign you on for this? Or when did they say, yeah, we want to hire you, want to do this thing over Christmas, you said?
Yeah, the first 2 weekends of December. So like the first 2 weekends of December, I believe they engaged us late August. And at the time I had, 4 booths, and I was like, wait, you want to do 13? And, I wasn't going to say, sorry, we're a small operation, we can't do that.
Right. Yeah.
I was ambitious. I was like, all right, cool. And I made a budget enough to make the booths, hire the staff, and to roll it out. And I was practically pulling some guys off the street to help us staff that at that point. Friends, family, anybody I could help. My brother, who was full-time student down in Tampa, did one of the weekends for me. I sent instructions on how to do it, but essentially that experience alone gave me and Steven and the crew the experience that we needed to be able to handle big projects. And the budget was big enough that it basically funded the build of 10 booths.
Oh, wow.
And it expanded our operation from 4 booths to 14 booths, instantly.
So you go through 2012, you get your additional booths built out because you land this big event with Armani Exchange. Where do you go from there? Do you just continue kind of building out the number of booths that you have in the cities that you're able to operate in as you grow more customers? Or at what point did you start looking at, because I think now you're doing you have like a number of different different products or offerings. How did those come about? How did you expand out after that big customer?
Yeah, great question. Well, the great thing about that is it kind of gave us the resources to explore a little bit more, both in trying new areas, new markets, which would hopefully increase our revenues and give us more resources to try new things. So we sent some equipment out to LA, we sent some to Texas, we sent one down to Miami, and we started to be able to just have them in storage units and available for clients when they would, our nationwide clients, these agencies or brands that wanted to send us to Miami, then we didn't have to ship a booth there. And we had like a rep there that had been trained before. So we started to see, okay, we can service a lot more of these and we can get more revenue. But eventually, we got to the point where, the competition's starting to ramp up. There's starting to be kind of technology, and everything that we had done from a lot of the technology sorry about that. From a lot of this technology standpoint was stuff that we could source online. Nothing that we had made we hadn't made a ton of proprietary stuff.
Yeah.
The way that the proprietary stuff was the way that we had compiled all of our components, our process, how we presented our creative direction. That was all very proprietary, but from a technology standpoint, anybody could really make that if they had the right knowledge and the right know-how.
Right.
So at that point, we were like, we need to kind of grow from a IP standpoint and from a technology standpoint if we're going to survive in this. And that's kind of a big theme of the company. And I think that of small business and entrepreneurism, like no idea is perfect. Mm-hmm. Like our idea certainly wasn't perfect. I didn't even know that was what it was going to be when I started.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes the pitfalls I see in some of my colleagues that, they put all their eggs in that perfect idea. And if it doesn't work, they don't adapt mm-hmm. and they don't change with it, and it fails, and they think that, the idea was wrong. Well, no, your idea was probably pretty solid and great, and you had a great foundation, but you need to adapt with the changes of the market and the changes of what you're supposed to be doing. Because especially in technology, if you don't adapt constantly, you're going to die. Like you just won't survive. So we started to invest in, finding some talented people that could make some IP. And we brought on our fourth partner, Quinn Hulam, who was an engineer. And he'd been working with us part-time for a couple of years. But eventually we were able to kind of convince him and sway him to leave his corporate job and come work with us full-time. And
what year was that in?
This was, I want to say this was 2014 was when we finally were able to kind of, at the end of 2014, we were finally able to get him to come work full time with us. But at the time we had been working on projects internally on how we can customize things for clients. Mm-hmm. But at that point, we started to figure out how we could get the resources to make some of our own new stuff.
Yeah.
But I find that a lot of our products now, and we have a lot of different products. I would say that the booth side of things is much more complex than just taking a photo and putting a logo on it. I mean, there's so much complicated stuff that we work with on a regular basis on creating really cool content for events. But on top of that, I mean, we've thought outside the booth quite a bit. And we have a lot of content creation platforms that were created from a client request. Like a client would be like, hey, we have this idea and we don't know how to make it, but can you guys kind of work with it? So we found that the booth gave us a kind of a jumping off point, because they wouldn't have come to us had they not had that relationship with us through, photo booths. It gave us a jumping off point to kind of spread our wings and do a lot more in the creative content creation, with various platforms. So
very cool. So you've got a bunch of these big customers, and you've done such a good job with the photo booth that they really see you as the expert in this space, and they maybe have an idea but don't know how to execute on it. But they say, hey, is this something you could help us figure out? Because we kind of have, this cool idea or this kind of crazy thing we want to try, but they come back to you guys. And so at that point, that's a huge upsell or cross-sell opportunity with these big brands that you guys have built these relationships with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we definitely leverage those relationships, and we're constantly trying to push the limits of where we're at. I mean, a lot of these in the totem pole of the budget and experiential marketing, in the photo booth stage, we were kind of at the bottom of the totem pole when it came to budgeting. Like they'd already kind of fleshed out their whole concept, and we're going to add this cool content creation platform here. Let's add these guys in. But now we're starting to see clients coming to us in the creative stage and like, hey, what can you do with this? And there's a lot bigger budgets. There's a lot more creative space to work with. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times what we find is clients will present an idea to us, and we have to make the debate internally. Can we make the budget big enough to where it's worth to do this custom job? Or can we productize this later and be something that we sell later?
Yeah.
So, a lot of two of our new products were actually as a result of a client coming to us wanting, a crazy request. We figure out how to do it. We figure out how to do it in the time, and we realize we can productize it, and then we make it into a product of our own.
Yeah.
And we leverage that R&D that we did on that first event where we're getting paid to do it into productizing them and being scalable products.
Yeah. So as you look kind of to the future for OM Digital, I'm curious, do you see trying to go, you have a number of products now, do you see trying to go deeper with the products that you already have, or continuing to do kind of really custom stuff for these amazing companies that you've built these relationships with over the years, or is it kind of a combination of both?
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of both. We definitely know that the margins are right with certain products, and we know we want to continue with them and push them more, market them more, and be even more efficient with those margins. And we know where we can cut certain areas and make it more efficient. And that's always the challenge, is how can we build efficiencies into the company so that our margins can be better, we can serve our customers quicker and easier. And that's definitely part of the growth of the company. We now have full blown offices in Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, and Stockholm, Sweden. Wow. With some satellites, with some equipment in Miami and Austin. But we literally, with that part of the company, we've done events all over the world. We've been Paris Fashion Week. We've done events in Tokyo. We've done events in all over the world. Rio, name it. And that's a very exciting business, and it's a growing business. Our challenge is obviously to make it more profitable, constantly make the products more scalable. And that's where the future of those things, of that side of the business, are going.
Well, so Dave, in 7 years, you took a $13,000 investment from your family and turned it into an international marketing company.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Sometimes
it is crazy.
Yeah, sometimes I don't know how it happened, but it's been a wild ride. It's been great.
Wow. Well, congratulations on all of your success. Do you have any advice for kind of looking back over these last 7 years? Do you have any advice for other entrepreneurs, either people who are thinking about starting their idea, or people who are maybe on their journey now? Any advice for people, because clearly you've figured something out, a way to be successful with your company?
I guess there'd be a couple things. Now, I know that not everybody is going to have a willing spouse that is able to work and make your income while you make nothing for a year. That's not how everybody's case is going to be, and I totally understand that. But knowing that not everybody's going to be backed by a giant investment and going to have just this perfect idea up front, is being able to just be persistent in knowing that, hey, you've done the research, you've done an analysis to see that what you're doing has a great base and it's what people want, but not being afraid to adapt and change according to what you find. You might find you've been thinking you've been doing it right the whole time, but as you go along, you realize, oh, I need to just make this tiny little adjustment here. But sometimes our pride gets in the way a little bit, and we don't want to take advice, or we don't want to admit that, hey, I had it perfect all along. Come on, guys.
Right.
And that would kind of be my biggest thing. And I would say that's probably the thing that I've learned to deal with the most is in the early days, I didn't know what I was doing at all. I still don't really know what I was doing. But I still don't know what I'm doing, but at this point, at least I do know that I got to separate. I got to get myself surrounded by people that can help us grow, that can do the right analysis that we need, get the right people around you, but be persistent with that. Like, just know that idea might not be perfect, but if I'm persistent and I work hard with this, you're going to always put yourself in the right situation.
guys, that's it for this week. Huge thanks to Dave and OM Digital, and thanks to my friend Brian Nail for putting me in touch with Dave for this episode. Go to omdigital.com to learn more about the incredible stuff these guys are doing. Next week's episode promises to be a good one. I believe this entrepreneur has grown the largest company we've had on the podcast so far, so check that out. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. I'm trying really hard to get on New and Noteworthy on iTunes. You can really help me out by giving the podcast 5 stars and leaving a review on iTunes. I'll love you forever, I promise. All right, guys, thanks. We'll see you next week.